In the 1980s, American society was rife with violence and crime, with murders, sexual assaults, robberies, and shootings occurring everywhere. On the afternoon of August 22, 1982, the sun was no longer scorching, and the air carried a hint of coolness. A boy was jogging on the Back Cove Trail in Portland, Maine. This was not his first time doing so. He often came to this path for exercise, and his parents were aware of this. However, this day was different from usual, as 11-year-old Richard Stetson did not return home on time. Even after nightfall, his parents standing at the door did not see their son. Sensing something was wrong, his parents immediately called the police. The next day, a driver on Interstate 295 noticed a boy lying in the bushes at a bend, barely clothed. He reported this to the police, and officers on patrol nearby rushed to the scene. They found that the boy had clear marks of strangulation on his neck, his clothes were almost completely removed, and there were bite marks on his arm. After forensic examination, the boy was identified as the missing Richard, and the cause of death was determined to be stabbing. Investigators took over the case. Since no weapon was found at the crime scene, they had to rely on the bite marks on Richard's body and investigate those who were on the Back Cove Trail at the time to find clues. As time went on, the investigation progressed slowly. Under immense public pressure, investigators focused on some pedophiles. Coincidentally, a suspect was present there that day, so they arrested him on charges of murder. Even though his teeth did not match the bite marks on the victim, he was still forcibly identified as the culprit. On September 18, 1983, a Sunday in Bellevue, Nebraska, a 13-year-old boy named Danny Joe Eberl, who worked for a newspaper to earn extra pocket money, disappeared after delivering only 3 of his 70 newspapers. Hours later, his father found his abandoned bicycle and the remaining 67 newspapers on the lawn in front of Danny's 4th customer's house, with no signs of struggle. Then Danny's brother reported a strange incident to the police. In recent days, Danny and he had been followed by a white man driving a brown car, which was an important clue. After 3 days of searching, Danny's body was found in a grassy area about 4 miles from where his bicycle was left. The crime scene was in disarray, and the look of terror on his face indicated that he had suffered unspeakable torture before his death. His underwear was pulled down, his hands and feet were tightly bound, his mouth was sealed with surgical tape, and he had 9 stab wounds. Investigators initially targeted pedophiles, even bringing in a hypnotist to help witnesses recall possibly forgotten memories. However, after questioning known pedophiles in the area, no evidence was found, and the investigation hit a dead end. A local bank announced a reward of $40,000 for information leading to the arrest of the killer. FBI profilers believed the perpetrator was likely a white, young man with sexual tendencies. A week after the crime, a young man was caught molesting 2 little boys, and the police considered him a major suspect. After his arrest, the young man pleaded not guilty, failed a polygraph test, and provided a false alibi. However, since he did not match the profile created by the FBI for the killer, he was released. On December 2nd, in a town 3 miles away from where Danny's body was found, 12-year-old Christopher Walden disappeared while walking to school. 2 days later, his body was discovered by a hunter 5 miles away from Papillion. The crime scene was gruesome. The little boy's throat was deeply slashed, almost decapitated, and there were stab wounds of varying depths on his body. Initially, investigators believed that the 2 cases were not committed by the same perpetrator because, this time, there were no signs of the victim being tied up, and the body was hidden more concealed. It was not until investigators interviewed local residents that several witnesses at the scene of Walden's disappearance reported seeing a white man get out of a brown car, apparently holding something in his hand, then approach a little boy, and shortly after they got into the car and left. With no leads, the 2 cases remained unsolved until January 11, 1984, when a kindergarten teacher in the area where the murders occurred provided the police and the FBI with the clues they needed. She reported that she had seen a young man driving around the area in a car, seemingly loitering or doing something unspecified. Given the recent murders, she wanted to record the vehicle's license plate. However, when she attempted to do so, the driver stopped in front of her and threatened her. They traced the license plate number and found that the car was not brown but was rented by an enlisted radar technician from Offutt Air Force Base. But after further investigation, they found that this man fit the FBI's initial profile of a white single male, similar to the composite sketch drawn from witness statements, and he also had a brown Chevrolet Nova sedan under repair. This man's name is John Joseph Joubert IV. His story began on July 2, 1963, when he was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Unfortunately, his mother was an extremely controlling person who was very harsh towards her family. So, 6 years later, his father, unable to bear his wife's verbal control and abuse, chose to divorce. In 1974, 11-year-old John and his sister moved with their mother to a dilapidated apartment in Portland, Maine. His childhood was very tragic. He was tightly controlled by his mother and lacked fatherly love. Even though he missed his father, his mother supervised him constantly, not allowing him to visit his father. As a result, John gradually came to hate this woman who controlled his behavior. Due to his mother's excessive control, his personality became timid, sensitive, and shy, traits that made him extremely easy to be bullied by others. And indeed, this was the case. Although he had always been an excellent student who loved learning at school, he believed in his heart that he was born to be bullied and abused. Therefore, he was often victimized by his classmates. One teacher once said that John appeared to be like a little boy throughout his entire high school period because he did not know how to protect himself at all. In order to compensate for the feeling of being isolated, John tried to integrate into the collective by participating in group activities, playing the clarinet, and joining the track and field team. However, as time went on, his inner self gradually became twisted. At the age of 13, John accidentally stabbed a girl with a pencil. But when the girl cried out in pain, he experienced sexual arousal, a feeling he had never felt before. So, the next day, as he rode his bicycle past another girl, he deliberately slashed her with a razor blade. In another incident, he beat a boy and almost strangled him into unconsciousness. It was at this point that John's sadistic and homicidal fantasies developed to the point where he imagined murdering strangers on the street, or binding and gagging those who resisted him. Because he had been bullied during his adolescence, he took immense pleasure in this dominant physical and mental power and began to consider randomly stabbing or slashing others. In a later psychiatric report, John was described as saying that he derived joy from the despair of his victims, stating, "If you're going to do it, get it over with." In 1981, John graduated from high school at a school in Portland. The police then issued a search warrant. When they searched John's barracks, the investigators found a hunting knife and a rope that matched the one used to bind Danny. After collecting this as evidence, the FBI determined that this unusual rope was made for the U.S. military in South Korea. During the interrogation, John stated that he obtained it from the reconnaissance sergeant of the unit where he served as an assistant, and then he admitted to the murders of Danny and Walden. On January 12, 1984, John was charged with the murder of the two Nebraska boys. During the trial, a panel of 3 judges sentenced him to death on 2 counts. At the time, when an FBI profiler introduced the cases of the 2 boys during a training course at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, a police officer from Portland, Maine, noticed similarities to a case in his jurisdiction that occurred before John joined the Air Force. After his teeth were found to match the bite marks on Richard, it was confirmed that in addition to these 2 murders, John was also responsible for Richard's murder. Therefore, in 1990, he was also sentenced to life imprisonment in Maine for the murder of Richard after his teeth were found to match the bite marks. In 1995, John filed a habeas corpus petition challenging his death sentence. His lawyer argued that several psychiatric evaluations of John proved that he suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder and schizoid personality disorder, claiming that John's murders were caused by mental derangement. However, the investigators pointed out that John was in a clear state of mind when he committed the crimes, stating that he clearly exhibited sadistic behavior by torturing Danny and Walden. Then John was scheduled to be executed by electric chair on July 17, 1996. Before his execution, he made his final statement saying, "I just want to say that again, I am sorry for what I have done. I do not know if my death will change anything or if it will bring anyone peace. And I just ask the families of Danny Abril and Christopher Walden and Richard Stetson to please try to find some peace and ask the people of Nebraska to forgive me. That's all." At 12:29 a.m. on July 17, 1996, he was executed by electric chair.